We have Mr. Mohit Saraf, who is on air with us. He's the M&A partner at Luthra and Luthra. And Mr. Saraf, we were just talking, about how Cyrus Mistry may actually be having the majority board backing when it comes to Tata Motors, because we did see 3 independent directors really back him when it comes to the other companies' board meetings.
That is quite possible that he may have the support of majority of the independent directors, but I'm not sure whether he has a majority support of the majority of the directors on the board. And I think we need to get that facts there to really make sure to understand whether he'll be able to continue as a chairman, or we have to wait for the EGM to decide his fate.
This is Vijay Iyer here joining from the Mumbai newsroom. In that sense, do you think this board meeting was a mere formality for more than one reason? Because we all know the EGM has been called and the notice clearly mentions that Cyrus Mistry and even Nasli Wadia will be removed from the board of Tata Motors. So in that sense, this was a mere formality, or it would be interesting rather to see which of the independent directors was on whose side, and was Cyrus having the confidence of the board to continue? How are you looking at it?
I'll tell you one thing, I clearly look at this issue not as independence of independent directors. I look at it as a control issue. There is an 18% shareholder who is trying to get support of independent directors and is trying to get control of the company vis-a-vis a 60% shareholder. That's really the issue. And therefore, I think I clearly understand the law provides that if you are a 10% plus shareholder, you have a right to nominate director. Tata Sons has a right to nominate the majority of the board, and therefore it has a right to nominate a chairman. And this is really Cyrus Mistry saying, once you have nominated me, now I owe no duty to you, and I have a fiduciary duty, which is correct, and therefore I would be there irrespective of your view and irrespective of your trust in me, which I feel it's a purely a control issue. There's nothing else in this whole issue. There's the fight to control, and therefore, it is unfortunate, but again, these are things which happen in all corporate history. This happens in the US more than India, and it is good that it's happening here, and shareholders have to be more vigilant who they nominate, and they need to make sure that there could be vested interest. These are all interesting features, particularly in Indian context, because there are a lot of companies in India where the promoters hold only a minority position. They hold 30–40%, they don't hold 60–70%. And therefore, this is a key learning. And I would say that a lot of Indian companies have to gear up to that. They have to consolidate their position. The promoters have to consolidate, so that these type of tug of war, whenever it happens, they are in a position to maintain the control. And they have to be very careful who they nominate, because at the end of the day, sometimes independent directors can become hostile to you. They are supposed to act in the interest of the company. Sometimes they can become hostile to the nominating shareholder or to the board or to the promoter, and can support a minority position. In case of listed companies, the regulations provide that there have to be large number of independent directors, and these are the risks which corporate India need to learn from it.
Mr. Sandeep Parekh, if I could get you at this point of time, although we are trying to get the minute details of what exactly transpired in the Tata Motors board meeting, but how do you see, maybe in the recent past, is this an unprecedented situation where a notice had already been issued for calling an EGM to remove Cyrus Mistry and Nasli Wadia, and perhaps there was a board meeting which was already scheduled and they had to chair this off lately? We have not seen such a situation in any of the corporate boardrooms. How are you looking at this meeting in itself?
No, so I think pretty much everything which we witnessed to the past 10–12 days is unprecedented in corporate India. And I think part of it is also because of the entire holding structure. The end shareholder is, majority shareholder is a charitable trust or a multiple trust. And you have all these complex cross holdings between all the Tata companies. Added to that, the fact that many of them, Tata Sons owns only a minority stake, sometimes 30, 35 or even 25%. So it's a pretty complex factual scenario for this to play out, and it's playing out in that manner. Add to that complex mix the role of independent directors, and I think it's certainly very interesting from an outside perspective. If you look at it from the company perspective, shareholder perspective, certainly it's a brutal time in terms of value destruction all over.
Mr. Saraf, how do you see this kind of situation? You were mentioning a very important point of how Indian companies or corporates will have to get used to this stuff, which is normally, we have not witnessed. Perhaps the US market has seen all this courtroom battles or dramas. In that sense, from a corporate governance perspective, how crucial a role would be of also market regulator SEBI here? Because many people are raising the question now, shouldn't SEBI at some point of time get into this, because at the end of the day, the minority shareholders are losing by every hour of this drama that is unfolding every day?
Actually, one important fact we need to understand is that the shareholders under Indian law do not have any fiduciary duty. They are there to protect themselves and do whatever it takes. So really, Tata Sons, for that matter, does not have that many obligation under law, but the board has that. Each member of the board has that, even if they are nominee of a majority shareholder or a minority shareholder. And a lot of these things which is being done right now, I would say it will be difficult to show that the way the minority shareholders are behaving, the way the independent directors are behaving, that is it really are they really delivering on the fiduciary duty, or there is something else? And I think this is an important issue. I would say really at the end of the day, the purpose of audit committee, independent directors and audit committee, independent directors on listed companies was that they will look at the interest of other stakeholders, they will look after the interest of the creditors, they look after the interest of the workers, all the other stakeholders, just not the promoter. And I think if the independent directors can be used in a control issue, then to large extent this institution of independent directors get defeated. So I would say regulators need to look at it very carefully.
Mr. Parekh, we all know the reality is going to be the battle will now shift to the shareholders via the EGM, which Tata Motors has already called for. From an average minority shareholder or largely a shareholder perspective, how do you see in an EGM, what are the issues that say both the sides will have to put forth in black and white? Would the reasoning will have to be put in by the pro and anti Cyrus and Nasli camp, in whichever side of the board do you sit? How do you see, say, the issues that will be put forth before the shareholder, before a shareholder rather can take a decision on which way they need to vote?
So essentially we are looking at two very different beasts. One is the board meeting, the other is the shareholder meeting. Since your question relates to shareholder meeting, let me contrast that with the board meeting. In the board meeting, we need to look at whether people acted in the best interest of the company, the fiduciary nature of each director, whether they're independent or non-independent. In a shareholders meeting, it's going to be quite a different ball game, and essentially the notice to shareholders itself will have the provisions why the directors sought to be removed. But ultimately, it's not really a judicial hearing. It's not on merits at all. Ultimately, it'll be discussed and decided based on mathematics. So if the majority shareholder, assuming they get the requisite majority of those present and voting, can throw out any director they like, including independent directors. So I think, having said that, I think it's going to be a very interesting event, because I don't think in the history of, and it's a fairly recent history of independent directors, we've ever had independent directors actually being thrown out by an EGM. So it's going to be a quite an interesting tussle which will happen, and the key role will obviously be of the institutional shareholders, mutual funds, and government entities like LIC. I think it'll be very interesting to watch them vote.
Mr. Luthra, as Mr. Sandeep Parekh is rightly pointing out, the focus will shift to the institutional investors, particularly LIC. We all know how LIC can perhaps be a kingmaker, if I could use that word, but there is also one line of thinking which says, why should the government-owned LIC get into this ego battle or this boardroom battle between two camps? In that sense, would LIC, do you see how it works, abstaining from voting in such a EGM and with such issues be the best way forward? What do you think the line of thinking that institutional investors like LIC will be doing at this point of time?
I clearly feel that LIC would just, because it's an investor, it'll look at its shareholder value and make a decision on that basis. Obviously, political issues and other things may matter, but I would say typically LIC should look at what is in the best interest of the shareholder. And I think in my view, the best interest of the shareholder is that the board actually works as one body, and it's not really an organization where people, it's not a body where people have different views. They talk about different views to media, they leak out letters to media, and where the whole focus shifts away from value creation for shareholders on revenue growth, on EBITDA growth, and it focuses on control issues. I would say that's not a great idea. So I would say LIC and other investors would look at from what is the good for the company. And again, these are important issues. I think this is a control. Sorry.
Mr. Parekh, if I could get you into this important point as Mr. Luthra was pointing out, the other important aspect, we are all talking about independent directors for the past 10 days after this whole broke out on October 24th. But there's also a question, there's a proxy advisory firm report which was just put out or made public today. In real sense, how many of these people are also clearly independent directors, because they have been sitting on the boards of Tata companies for close to a decade or plus. So in that sense, would a real independent director's say role or the independence itself will also be put to test by sitting in boards for more than close to a decade plus?
So again, see, there's a technical answer to that, which is the New Companies Act of 2013 has made many of these provisions prospective in terms of the duration, maximum duration which an independent director can sit on a particular board. So I think those are all technical questions. I don't want to get into that. But going forward, certainly most listed companies will have to abide by a two-term, which is 10 years sitting experience in a company before they need to do a cooling off period. So I think that will happen over a period of time. But of course, we can't change 60-year-old culture overnight, and which is what the Companies Act has done rightly. Having said that, of course, independent directors should, whether they've been sitting for 10 years or 1 year, I think the key is they have to act in the best interest of the company, and I think that duty is independent of how long they've sat on the board.
Mr. Luthra, if I could get you at this point of time, where do you see the whole thing panning out and going? We all know that EGMs of three perhaps Tata Group listed companies. Mr. Saraf, so if I could, I hope you are with us. If where is this heading now? We all know EGMs of three companies being called, matter of time before all other listed companies EGMs are also called out. And yes, TCS is Tata Motors Sons as an advantage with 74% holding. Other companies, how do you see this panning out? Would Tata Sons as a promoter still have an advantage at this point of time?
They always have an advantage because they are the largest shareholder. But I think in my view, it's going to get very ugly. I can't see the way I have been following it up, selective leakage of documents in the media, statements, counter accusations. I would say that I don't see Cyrus Mistry really wants Tata Sons to exercise their legal right under the Companies Act, and therefore this will get into a different type of an issue. It will get issues about governance issues, insider leaking of insider trading issues, and other things. So I would say really this appears to getting very ugly, and I think right now I think the Mistry camp has gone to this extent. I would say now they will try to see whichever smaller companies where Tata Sons have a smaller shareholder, if they can somehow control it with support of institutional investors, they would like to do that. And I would say that that is where we are going towards, and therefore they will lead to a lot of legal fight And even I think if you look at the initial bid, Tata Sons was not prepared for that, and they did not leak out information. But I would say now Tata Sons is, particularly after losing 2 companies, they've decided that it's going to get ugly and they need to exercise the right. And I think it's going to get, I don't see Cyrus Mistry camp backing off.
Okay, all right, Mr. Saraf and as well as Mr. Parekh, thanks so much for joining us. Tata Motors Q2 numbers are now on air. As you can see on your screens, the net profit has come in at 848 crore rupees. That's way below our expectations. We were expecting a figure of 2,800 crore rupees. We'll be back with more updates on the Q2 numbers. Stay tuned.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.